A PhD student has accidentally uncovered a lost city in Mexico centuries after it disappeared under jungle canopy. Using an advanced laser scanning technology called LiDAR, a team from Chilean University, led by Luke Thomas, mapped an area that had been mostly unexplored for centuries, as tends to happen in Mexico. And Luke Thomas joins us now from Arizona. Thank you for your time. Now, can we set the scene? We'll just rewind. You were doing a Google deep dive, as you call it. You think, that's kind of cool. What were you looking at, and what made you twig that this could be something?
Yeah, I was looking at data that had been collected by a team of ecologists in 2013 who were interested in mapping above ground carbon in Mexico's forests. They were basically looking at the trees. What's really distinctive about LiDAR as a technology is that it's essentially a shower of laser range finding measurements that rain down from an airplane. And it allows you to digitally remove the trees and see the ground anywhere that light could penetrate. And so I took this data set that had been collected in order to look at trees, selected all, deleted the trees, and immediately laughed because I realized that I was looking at a really substantial Maya city that was previously unknown to the scientific community.
To understand how a city of this magnitude can remain completely invisible to the naked eye, it is necessary to understand the mechanics of the technology that finally revealed it. The system used is called LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. The process involves mounting a highly calibrated laser scanner to the underside of an aircraft. As the plane flies in tight grid patterns over a target area, the machine fires hundreds of thousands of laser pulses toward the ground every single second. When these lasers are fired over a dense tropical jungle like Campeche, the vast majority of the light pulses hit the upper canopy of the trees and bounce directly back to the sensor. However, because the forest canopy is not a solid, impenetrable surface, a small fraction of the laser pulses slip through the gaps in the leaves and branches. These specific pulses travel all the way down, strike the actual forest floor, and then reflect back up to the airplane. The machine records the exact time it takes for each individual pulse of light to return, calculating the precise distance to the target. This process generates a massive, three-dimensional digital cloud containing millions of data points. Researchers then use specialized algorithms to classify the data. They instruct the computer to identify all the points that represent vegetation and mathematically erase them from the three-dimensional model. This technique is known as digital deforestation. When the trees are computationally removed, the scientists are left with a bare earth model, revealing the exact topographical contours of the ground surface beneath the jungle. When the bare earth model of this specific Campeche sector rendered on the screen, the architectural density was unprecedented. The survey block analyzed by Thomas covered roughly 122 square kilometers of land. Within that designated block, the software identified an astonishing 6,764 distinct human-made structures. The most concentrated area of the settlement was officially designated as Valeriana, named after a nearby freshwater lagoon. The central, continuous urban core of Valeriana covers roughly 16.6 square kilometers. To put this geographical footprint into historical perspective, Valeriana was significantly larger than the ancient Roman city of Londinium, the settlement that eventually grew into the historic core of modern London. Based on the sheer number of residential structures mapped by the lasers, archaeologists estimate that the population of Valeriana reached between 30,000 and 50,000 inhabitants during its peak. This height of occupation likely occurred during the late Classic period of Maya civilization, spanning roughly from 750 to 850 AD. This immense population makes Valeriana one of the most densely packed ancient cities ever recorded in the Americas. In terms of structural density, it is currently ranked as the second most densely populated Maya city ever discovered. It is surpassed only by the legendary site of Calakmul, a recognized Maya superpower located roughly 100 kilometers away. The layout of Valeriana, however, reveals a highly sophisticated approach to urban planning that challenges modern assumptions about ancient cities. Unlike many modern cities that radiate outward from a single centralized downtown district, Valeriana was built around a dual-node system. The city featured two distinct monumental hubs located approximately 2 kilometers apart. These twin city centers were physically connected by wide, elevated limestone roads known as causeways, and the space between them was filled with a continuous, unbroken sprawl of densely packed residential housing. Within these two monumental hubs, the LiDAR data revealed the classic architectural hallmarks of a major political capital. The scans outlined enormous stepped temple pyramids. These were not simply geometric shapes, but complex terraced platforms built from limestone blocks designed to elevate temples high above the forest floor. These towering structures served as the religious and administrative focal points of the city, where the ruling elite would conduct public ceremonies. Surrounding the bases of these massive pyramids were enclosed public plazas and specialized administrative buildings. Most importantly, the researchers identified the distinct narrow, eye-shaped outline of a formal ball court. The Maya ritual ball game known as pits was a central element of their religious and political life. The presence of a dedicated ball court is a definitive indicator that Valeriana was a city of immense regional importance and political influence. It was a location capable of hosting visiting dignitaries, conducting high-stakes diplomatic events, and projecting power across the surrounding territories. Sustaining 50,000 residents in the dense tropical environment of Campeche required absolute mastery of civil engineering, particularly regarding water management. The Maya lowlands experience a distinct and brutal dry season that can last for several months. In the specific region where Valeriana is located, there are very few permanent surface rivers. Surviving the dry season meant capturing and storing massive amounts of rainwater during the wet season. The LiDAR data provided clear evidence of this hydraulic engineering. The ancient inhabitants of Valeriana had artificially manipulated their natural environment by constructing a large dam across an arroyo, which is a seasonal stream channel that only flows during heavy rains. By blocking this channel, the engineers created an enormous artificial reservoir capable of storing millions of gallons of fresh water. This infrastructure was critical for municipal water supply and for sustaining the intensive agricultural systems necessary to feed the urban population. Despite the monumental scale of its pyramids, its complex water systems, and its sprawling residential neighborhoods, Valeriana remained completely unknown to the modern world for centuries. The irony of this isolation is that the city is not located in an uncharted, inaccessible wilderness. The monumental core of Valeriana sits just a 15-minute walk from Federal Highway 186, a major paved transportation route near the modern town of Expo. The modern landscape surrounding the ruins is heavily utilized for agriculture. For generations, local farmers have been clearing the brush and planting their crops directly on top of the ancient housing terraces and collapsed ceremonial platforms. Because the limestone structures had deteriorated over a millennium and had been completely covered by soil and thick root systems, they appeared to the naked eye as nothing more than natural, rolling hills in the landscape. The local inhabitants had no idea they were farming on the remains of a lost metropolis. The discovery of Valeriana is forcing the academic community to fundamentally rewrite the history of Maya civilization. For decades, the prevailing theory in Mesoamerican archaeology was based on a vacant terrain model. Western scholars widely believed that the Maya built highly isolated ceremonial centers in the jungle, inhabited only by priests and royalty, while the vast majority of the population lived in scattered, disconnected agricultural villages. The spaces between the major temple complexes were assumed to be empty, wild, and untouched. Valeriana proves definitively that this theory is incorrect. The Maya lowlands were not an empty wilderness. The LiDAR data shows that the region was a heavily crowded, intensely cultivated, and deeply interconnected urban tapestry. The landscape was a continuous suburban sprawl. The territory between the major city centers was systematically modified, packed with terraced farms, raised agricultural fields, defensive walls, and endless neighborhoods of stone foundations. The Maya had effectively conquered the jungle, turning it into one of the most densely populated regions on Earth at that time. However, this incredible record of urban expansion and technological success also provides a clear explanation for the city's eventual downfall. By engineering the landscape to its absolute maximum capacity to support 50,000 people, the inhabitants of Valeriana created an incredibly rigid and inflexible society. They became entirely dependent on their massive reservoirs and their heavily modified agricultural terraces. When a prolonged period of severe climate change brought decades of intense drought to the region at the end of the 9th century, the city could not adapt. The engineered reservoirs dried up, the overworked soil failed, and the sheer density of the population meant there were no alternative resources available. The infrastructure that allowed the city to thrive ultimately made it too fragile to survive a changing climate, leading to the complete abandonment of the metropolis. The unearthing of Valeriana through a forgotten carbon monitoring dataset proves that the era of major geographical discovery is far from over. It highlights the immense potential of applying modern remote sensing technologies to existing data archives. As researchers continue to run digital deforestation algorithms on ecological and geographical surveys around the world, it is highly likely that Valeriana will not be the last invisible megacity to emerge from the digital noise.